Okay, so let's dive into this whole shoplifting thing that's been all over the news lately. Imagine walking into your favorite store and suddenly you're like bombarded with security, maybe even employees with body cams. It's a bit unnerving, right? And that's becoming the reality for a lot of shoppers. So we're going to take a deep dive into why this is happening. We've got some really interesting articles here from Birmingham Live and The Independent. They focus specifically on how Poundland, yeah, Poundland of all places, is dealing with this.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy what's happening over there.
Hmm.
Poundland's parent company, Pepco, they reported a whopping 44 billion pound loss across all their stores. And the reason they're giving is this thing called stock shrinkage. So get this was just in the past year. Oh, and it gets even crazier. It's a 30% jump in just 2 years. So something's
Yeah.
definitely going on.
Yeah, those are some serious numbers. And it seems like Poundland's not just going to sit back and take it. They're rolling out this whole new initiative, they're calling it. Retail Against Crime. We're talking anti-theft, techs, more security guards, you name it. They're even putting body cams on their staff. It honestly feels like they're preparing for some kind of retail war.
Right. And while all these measures might seem a little extreme, I think it's important to understand what's happening on the ground. The British Retail Consortium actually reported a shocking number. They say there are 1,300 incidents of violence and abuse against shop workers every single day. You hear that every single day. And that's a 50% increase from last year. So these new measures, they're not just about protecting the merchandise, they're about protecting the employees who are facing this increasingly hostile environment.
Yeah, it's really sad to think about. Yeah, these essential workers are facing abuse just for doing their jobs. It makes you wonder, how can anyone feel safe and valued in a workplace like that? And the thing is, this isn't just a Poundland problem, is it?
Exactly. This is happening all over. The Independent cites official figures showing shoplifting in England and Wales is at a 20-year high. We're talking a 29% increase in just 1 year. So this trend is clearly much bigger than just one store or one chain.
So it makes you wonder what's really going on here. What's driving this massive surge in shoplifting? Is it just economic hardship, or are there other factors at play? I mean, what do you think is contributing to all of this? And how does it change your perspective on the whole issue? We want to know what you guys think. Head over to our social media and share your thoughts.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex issue. I think it's really important that we don't oversimplify things. While economic factors are definitely a part of it, we need to really dig deeper to understand all the different issues that are contributing to this surge. It's not a simple problem with a simple solution, you know?
Absolutely. So let's unpack some of those complexities and try to get a better grasp on what's really going on here. Um,
Yeah, so one thing to consider is that Poundland is kind of in a uniquely vulnerable position here. Their whole business model is based on low prices. And they have a lot of stores in these high street locations, which makes them an easy target. So they're facing this double whammy of economic pressure and increased theft.
that makes sense. I mean, if people are struggling financially
Uh-huh.
and they see a place where they can easily get things for cheap, it's understandable why that might be tempting.
Right. And the thing is, it's not just about Poundland's bottom line. This rising theft, it has a much wider economic impact. When businesses lose money to theft, they have to raise prices to compensate. And guess who ends up paying for that in the end? It's the consumers, everyone, even those who aren't shoplifting.
Yeah, it's like a ripple effect that spreads throughout the whole economy.
Exactly. And that's not even considering the psychological impact on the employees and shoppers.
Mhm.
Can you imagine working in a store where you constantly feel on edge, worried about theft or even violence? That's got to take a toll on morale and job satisfaction.
Absolutely. It creates this really tense and unpleasant atmosphere. And for shoppers, it makes the whole experience less enjoyable.
Right. Instead of a relaxed outing, it starts to feel more like going through airport security with all the security measures and suspicion.
So where do we go from here? How do we address this complex problem without creating a constant arms race between retailers and shoplifters?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But I think a good starting point is acknowledging that this is a multifaceted problem. It's not just about catching shoplifters. It's about understanding why people are driven to steal in the first place.
Or we talked about economic hardship earlier, but are there other underlying causes like desperation, social inequality, or even gaps in mental health services? If someone is driven to steal basic necessities, what does that tell us about the support systems we have in place?
Those are all really important questions. And while there's no one-size-fits-all solution, maybe part of the answer lies in addressing those underlying issues. Investing in social safety nets, providing access to affordable housing and healthcare, and supporting community initiatives that address poverty and mental health. Those are all things that could potentially make a real difference.
Yeah, it's a shift in perspective. Instead of just punishing the act of shoplifting, we need to focus on addressing the root causes. It's about creating a society where people have the resources and support they need to thrive, rather than resorting to desperate measures.
Exactly. And while these systemic changes are crucial, there are also things we can do on an individual level. Maybe it's just being more aware of the challenges faced by retail workers and showing them a little kindness and understanding. Or maybe it's supporting local businesses that are struggling with theft, or donating to charities that provide essential goods to people in need.
Right, it's about recognizing that we're all interconnected. And the well-being of our communities depends on all of us working together to create a more equitable and compassionate society.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we want to leave you with this thought. What role can each of us play in addressing this shoplifting surge? Maybe it's something as simple as showing appreciation for the retail workers who deal with this every day. Or maybe it's engaging in thoughtful conversations about the underlying causes of crime. Every small action can contribute to a larger solution.
Remember, we're all part of this interconnected web, and the well-being of our communities depends on our collective efforts to create a more just and compassionate world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore even more about this issue. Until then, stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, there's always more to learn, more to understand, and more to discuss. You know, it's easy to get lost in all the statistics and the security measures and stuff, but we can't forget about the real people affected by all of this shoplifting. You've got employees facing more and more risks every day, and businesses are really struggling to deal with all the financial losses.
Yeah, and those losses, they don't just disappear. Like that 44 billion pound loss for Poundland, that's a huge chunk of their profits, which could mean they have less money to invest in things like wages for their employees,
What?
or even community initiatives. And that's just one company. Think about that across the entire retail sector, and you can really see how far the impact reaches.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect. If businesses are constantly losing merchandise because of theft, they have to raise prices to make up for it.
Right.
And ultimately, those increased costs, they get passed on to the consumer, even the ones who aren't shoplifting.
Exactly. It's a classic example of how this kind of behavior really hurts everyone in the long run.
And it's not just the financial side of things either, is it? There's also the psychological impact on both employees and shoppers.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine working in a store where you constantly feel like you're on edge, always worried about someone stealing something or even getting violent.
Yeah, that's got to be incredibly stressful. It definitely take a toll on your morale and job satisfaction.
For sure. And for shoppers, it makes the whole experience a lot less enjoyable.
Right.
Instead of feeling relaxed and
Yeah.
welcome, you're surrounded by security measures and suspicion.
It's more like going through airport security than a casual shopping trip.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? How do we tackle this complex problem without turning every store into a fortress?
That's the big question, isn't it? There are no easy answers here.
Yeah.
But I think the first step is recognizing that this is a multi-layered issue. It's not just about catching shoplifters. It's about understanding what's driving people to steal in the first place.
Okay, so we've talked about economic hardship as a factor.
Hmm.
But what about other underlying causes, like desperation or social inequality, or even gaps in mental health services? I mean, if someone is stealing basic necessities, what does that tell us about the support systems that are available to them?
Those are all incredibly important questions.
Yeah.
And while there's no magic bullet solution, I think part of the answer might lie in addressing those underlying issues, investing in social safety nets, making sure people have access to affordable housing and healthcare, supporting community initiatives that tackle poverty and mental health. These are all things that could have a real impact.
It's a shift in perspective, isn't it? Instead of
Yeah.
simply focusing on punishment, we need to look at the root causes of the problem and create a society where people have the support they need to thrive.
Exactly.
So they don't feel like they have to resort to desperate measures like shoplifting.
And while those systemic changes are essential, we can also do our part on an individual level.
Right.
Maybe it's just being more aware of the challenges that retail workers face and showing them a little kindness and understanding.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's supporting local businesses that are struggling with theft or donating to charities that provide essential goods to those in need.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of this bigger picture and that the well-being of our communities depends on everyone working together
Exactly.
to create a more just and compassionate world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So think about the last time you went to a store
Huh.
and you saw all these increased security measures. Did it make you feel safer? or did it create a sense of unease? We want to hear your thoughts on this. Head over to our social media and tell us how this whole shoplifting surge has affected your perspective on things.
It's interesting how Poundland's response to all this is kind of like a microcosm of what's happening across the whole retail industry. It seems like everyone's jumping on the security bandwagon, facial recognition, AI-powered cameras, you name it. Yeah, it definitely feels like a trend. And it makes you wonder, is all this security sustainable in the long run? Are we going to reach a point where going shopping feels like going through airport security?
And if that happens, what does that mean for actual physical stores? Will people just say forget it and shop online where it feels safer and more convenient?
It's a valid concern for sure.
Yeah.
There's a fine line between security and customer experience. If shopping becomes too much of a hassle or even intimidating, it could really hurt foot traffic and sales.
And that would be devastating for local economies, especially small businesses that depend on people actually coming into their stores.
Right, we're already seeing these retail deserts popping up in some places
Yeah.
where it's hard to find basic goods and services.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue with no easy solutions. We need to find ways to address the root causes of shoplifting without making shoppers feel like they're walking into a prison.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's about striking a balance, where security measures are effective but not overbearing. Or maybe it's about investing in community programs that offer alternatives to shoplifting, like job training or support groups for people struggling with poverty or addiction.
I think it's about understanding that this isn't just a retail problem, it's a societal problem. And it's going to take businesses, policymakers, and communities all working together to create a more supportive and equitable environment for everyone.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this issue, we want to leave you with this thought. What can we each do to address this shoplifting surge? Maybe it's just being kind and understanding to retail workers. Or maybe it's starting conversations about the root causes of crime. Every little bit helps.
Exactly. Remember, we're all connected. And building a better world starts with each of us taking responsibility.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. There's always more to learn, more to understand, and more to discuss.